The Mime short horror film. I was walking home one night when I saw Mime standing perfectly still under a flickering streetlight. His painted grin stretched too wide, as if it was waiting just for me. I don't know why I stopped, or why I couldn't look away, but that was the beginning of everything that still haunts me. It started on a Thursday night. I had stayed late at work, pushing through emails, trying to catch up before the weekend. By the time I left the office, the streets were nearly empty. The air was damp and heavy, the kind of night where your footsteps sound louder than they should, echoing off brick walls. I cut through the usual side streets to get home faster, headphones in, hood up, when I noticed movement up ahead. At first, I thought it was just someone waiting for a bus, but as I got closer, I saw it was a mime. Not a performer on a stage or in a park, just a mime, standing alone on the corner, perfectly still. White face paint, black tears painted beneath the eyes, striped shirt, and gloves. His mouth was painted into a crooked grin. The thing that made my stomach drop wasn't the costume, was the way he was looking directly at me, as if he'd been waiting for me specifically. I slowed, uneasy. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't break. Just that silent, mocking grin. I kept walking, pretending not to notice, though my skin crawled with the certainty that his eyes followed me. A block later, I glanced back. He hadn't moved, but I swear the painted grin looked wider. The next night, he was there again. Same spot, same streetlight, flickering above him. This time, when I passed, he lifted his hands in the air, palms flat, miming as if pressing against an invisible wall. He tilted his head, studying me through that fake barrier, as though he was trapped inside some unseen box. I quickened my pace, heart pounding. I told myself it was just some street performer, maybe trying to freak people out for fun. But here's the thing. I had lived in this neighborhood for 5 years, and I had never seen him before. And mimes don't just stand in the same spot, night after night, silently watching. I avoided looking back this time. I didn't want to know if he was still watching me. On the third night, he wasn't under the streetlight. For a second, I felt relief. Maybe it was over. Maybe he'd moved on. But when I reached my apartment and unlocked the door, I froze. In the reflection of the glass panel by the lobby entrance, I saw him across the street, standing perfectly still, facing me. I went inside, locked everything behind me, and tried to laugh it off. But sleep didn't come with sleep. Every creak of the old building made me jolt awake, convinced I'd see that painted face pressed against my window. The next morning, I mentioned it to a coworker. He chuckled, said maybe some theater kid was practicing, or maybe it was just some eccentric neighbor. I wanted to believe that, but something deeper told me it wasn't that simple. That night, I tried a different route home. I circled 3 extra blocks just to avoid the corner where I usually saw him. For most of the walk, the streets were empty, but as I reached my building, my stomach dropped. He was already there, standing directly across from my apartment. This time, he wasn't pretending to be trapped in a box. He was miming a rope, pulling hand over hand, as though dragging something invisible toward him. His painted eyes locked on me the entire time. I bolted into the building, my breath shallow, my chest aching. The days blurred together after that. He was always there. No matter which way I walked home, no matter what time I left work, he was waiting. Sometimes he mimed, pressing his face against glass, staring at me through imaginary panes. Sometimes he mimed opening a door and stepping through it, as if rehearsing his entrance into my world. And once, the most terrifying of all, he mimed, slipping a noose around his neck, tightening it, then pointing at me. I stopped going out at night, unless I absolutely had to. One evening, I decided I'd had enough. I left work early, while it was still light, determined to confront him. If he was just some creep in makeup, I'd tell him to knock it off. Maybe even threaten to call the cops. When I reached the corner, he wasn't there. The street was empty. I let out a shaky laugh. Maybe I'd finally scared myself too much. Maybe he'd moved on to someone else. But when I turned my key in my apartment door, I heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not on my door, on the window, the one facing the street. I turned, heart hammering. And there he was, the Mime, standing outside, his gloved hand still raised from knocking. I screamed, fumbling the lock, slamming the blinds shut. I didn't dare open them again. For the next week, I didn't see him. Not once. I started to relax, slowly. Maybe he'd finally gotten bored. Maybe it had all been some twisted performance art. But last night, I woke to a sound that froze me to the bone. It was faint, muffled, but unmistakable. The sound of someone walking in my living room. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep by my bed, every nerve on fire. My apartment door was still locked. The windows were still shut, but the footsteps were real slow, deliberate, crossing the floor. And then they stopped. I forced myself to peek into the hallway. The living room was dark, but in the dim glow of the streetlight outside, I saw something that made my stomach turn. An invisible wall. Or at least, that's what it looked like. Smudges on the glass of my window, 2 perfect handprints pressed against it from the inside. I never saw him come in. I never saw him leave. But when I looked in the mirror this morning, there was a faint smear of white paint on my cheek. And tonight, I'm too afraid to turn off the lights, because I know he's here. Somewhere. Watching. Waiting. Smiling.